Chevron and Apache Canada are proposing a natural gas pipeline project across the traditional territory of the Wet'suwet'en and many other BC First Nations. The gas would be extracted in northeastern BC from shale gas reserves in Treaty 8 territory or the Fort Nelson First Nation. The Pacific Trails Pipeline, or the PTP, would then carry the gas to the Kitimat LNG plant on the coast. The natural gas would then be liquefied and shipped off to Asian markets for export. Operating the pipeline, Chevron would like to hear your input and concerns regarding the approval of the project.
If the Moricetown band and the Wet'suwet'en were to sign on, approve the project, and the PTP pipeline came through, there's really a number of areas where there'll be economic opportunity. The first and foremost will be in both the pre-construction and the construction phase. And there's a benefit agreement called the First Nations Limited Partnership that's part of that. It talks about how the contracting will be done, and there's some preferential contracting for First Nations contractors.
Well, it completes the circle. We would need to have everybody involved, and we have 15 out of 16 involved, and so having Moricetown as part of the FNLP will financially benefit everybody. It will benefit directly Moricetown. They'll receive a payment right away. It will also benefit all of the other First Nations communities up and down the line who will get a payment when everybody joins in. But longer term, it means that Moricetown can participate in the joint ventures, it can participate in all the job training opportunities, it can participate in all the contracting opportunities. So those are really quite significant and will make a big difference to people in terms of their ability to get work and participate in what is going to be a very significant economic project over the next several years.
There's a $200 million cash flow for First Nations who do sign the FNLP. However, the Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs remain firm in their stance.
The office of Wet'suwet'en, they follow the mandate of the hereditary chiefs, and the hereditary chiefs follow the mandate of the people. And the mandate to the office of Wet'suwet'en is no pipelines, because currently every time that we have something that we want to address in protection, title and rights, they change the play field. Every time that we get close to the goalpost, they change it. They want to have a business relationship, and it had nothing to do with rights and title. But you can't put a foot on the land unless you're infringing our rights and title, because you're doing it against the wishes of the chiefs, the people, and the nation itself.
Well, our focus is really to work with the Wet'suwet'en, the hereditary chiefs, the office of the Wet'suwet'en, the First Nations, the Moricetown Indian Band, the First Nations along the pipeline right away. We want to gather the input on cultural values and on the environmental side, and we want to work with the communities and First Nations to limit the impact on both the environment and certainly on the cultural side, and then also to develop some mitigations and things we can do to, if we do have an impact, which there will be parts where we will have an impact, that we can mitigate that or maybe even improve some other areas.
When you put a pipeline through an area, there's definitely an impact. We need to clear the trees off of the area that the pipeline is affecting. It's a very small area. We're talking 38 meters wide, so basically 40 steps is as wide as our pipeline area is going to be. Once we've put the pipe in the ground and closed the hole back up, it'll be 3 meters under the ground. Once we've done that, we will minimize that area to actually 18 meters, so 20 steps is as wide as the line will be. And the rest of the area will fill back in with natural vegetation. We can't put trees on the actual right-of-way surface because the trees could come down and impact the pipeline, but the rest of the area would be narrowed. So that's the biggest impact I see, is that there will be a straight line through the territory, and that could be used for hunting, or sometimes wolves use long territories, long runs to run down moose and that type of thing. So that's a long-term impact that we can't do anything about. Some of the things we are trying to minimize the impacts on, we stay away from things such as mountain goat areas, grizzly bear dens, any special features that we find, cultural heritage. If we find anything with archaeology, we would stay out of that area and make sure that that area is protected. And that's some of the work that's going on now, is finalizing the area of the pipeline where it will go.
The Wet'suwet'en are currently the strongest in British Columbia against pipelines, because right now there is one pipeline that was put in the 1960s. There is not any other pipeline. And the ones that they're trying to put through right now are going to potentially be along our major spawning beds for our salmon. They were given alternate routes, safe routes, but they say they're too expensive.
So we also believe that water is very important, and we want to make sure it's protected in every way possible. We comply with all of our commitments, and we get appropriate permits. We get the permits through the federal and provincial government when construction has to occur in waterways. So oftentimes you can go through a waterway, above a waterway, or underneath a waterway, and our preferred choices are always to go above or underneath, because we recognize that there's more impact to waterways when we actually go through it and ditch through the waterways. So one of the things that we do is, before anything happens within a waterway and a river, we make sure that we take the fish out of the area where the construction is going to go. So we block both ends of an area of a stream or a river. We take the fish, a biologist will come and take the fish out of that area and then move it downstream. So we make sure that when construction occurs, there's no fish in the area of the construction. That's one way.
So during the construction of the pipeline, we have environmental advisors, myself and another fellow, that will be working directly with the construction crews. So we'll be on the ground every day with the crews, making sure that the commitments that come out of the Calgary office, our Vancouver office, and any government organization, that those commitments are being maintained in the field.
I believe that they think they can to their standards, but it must be realized that the standards have been lowered. The Wet'suwet'en standards of protections are higher than British Columbia's and Canada's. That's why we've never agreed to these projects, because we will not agree to lessen our standards of protection.
So right now the companies are saying that they're going to manage to a high standard. The governments and industry are making these claims, yet we do not have the raw data, the information from all these baseline studies as proof that they could effectively monitor environmental change or impact. So that's a huge question right now about the claims governments and companies are making. You could say things on paper, you could have acts, you could have standards. If you don't have the eyes on the ground and if you don't have the information and data, you'll never know what's changing.
Well, the environmental concerns are in a sense being handled both inside the agreement, because there are provisions in the agreement that give each First Nation clear opportunities and responsibilities to enforce the environmental regulations and the agreements which the province has set out. So that's an additional element. It's like you have the commercial plus you have that. But in addition to that, there are ongoing government-to-government discussions between the First Nations and the province about what other possibilities there may be for improving the environment, for dealing dealing with some of the effects of building a pipeline. But I think it's fair to say this is going to be a project which will take environmental protection to a new level because of the seriousness that everybody attaches to making sure it gets done in the right way.
It's absolutely crucial to have First Nation involvement in environmental monitoring, and we are committed to having First Nations involved as environmental monitors. So we have commitments, and we employ First Nations companies, and we are a part of training programs to make sure that First Nations can have the opportunity to monitor alongside of us and be part of recognizing when an impact has occurred.
In terms of contrasting it to an oil pipeline, the real difference, if the pipeline is operating and it has integrity, then essentially the fluid is contained and there's really no difference. If there is a leak or an incident, or somebody digs on the pipeline and creates an incident, then obviously what comes out is a different story, one being oil, the other being natural gas, which then would go into the air essentially. What happens then is there are a series of valves that would get shut in and close the pipeline down if there's an accident or an incident like that.
Okay, so transporting gas versus oil. Oil is the same thing that goes into your pickup. It's a fluid. If it were to break, if the pipeline were to burst and it had oil, that oil would go directly into the soil, directly into any water courses that were nearby. It's a definite risk and a big issue. Our pipeline, the Pacific Trails Pipeline, or PTP pipeline as they call it, is a gas pipeline. So we'll have a gas that's flowing through that pipe. If it were to burst, or if someone were to break it with an excavator, or if there were an earthquake and that was to break the pipeline, that gas floats up from 3 meters underneath the ground, through the ground and into the atmosphere. There's very little environmental impact.
I think it makes a difference because we have to look at the construction of the pipelines itself. You are still tearing up the ground, you are still making disturbances, you are still threatening waterways. Number one, if they put in pipelines, they have to put in roads. Now, as a liability issue, they can't have the public along these routes. It's a safety hazard. So you're restricting your own access to the territory.
You know, we're looking for a dialogue, and I know, you know, my personal perspective is we're not out here to change everybody's minds. What we want to do is provide the facts as we see them to the pipelines. You know, what do they do? Pipelines have been built in Canada, around the world. They're one of the safest ways to transport natural gas that you can have, and the environmental impact and the cultural impacts can be mitigated if it's done right and if it's operated properly. So we want to provide our story so that the communities along the pipeline right away, including Moricetown, can, you know, look at it and make their own, you know, call on that.
With environmental, social, and cultural concerns, many have been vocal in their opposition to the project. However, there are 4 Wet'suwet'en bands who have signed on to the FNLP. It will now be up to the community to decide together if the Pacific Trails pipeline is right for Moricetown.
Again, I'll say it, do we maintain the status quo and keep our people in poverty, or do we move forward economically and socially? Yes, there are people going to be opposed to it. Like I said, the majority, are we going to let the majority of our people suffer? So those are the questions that are tasked with every government chief of council here. And I see like 2 systems here, and I think that how are we taking care of the people, all of the people? You know, I think in any situation, whether it be this community by itself, there's going to be hard decisions that need to be made, and this is the forum to do it. Have both sides weigh the pros and cons. What's best for the people? What's in the best interest of the people should be in the forefront. That should be in your minds when you think about what's best for the whole community.
I continue to be impressed by the people who are really focusing on the economic issue, that they don't want to live in poverty forever, that they want to be able to see their kids getting work, and they want to see the opportunities grow, and they understand the nature of the economic development which is taking place in the province. And so they want to be part of it. They want to make sure that the environment is protected, but they don't want to just say no. They do want to have a chance to figure out how this can be done in an environmentally sustainable way. And from my perspective, sustainable development is what it's all about. And the development has to meet a basic test of sustainability.
I think the pipeline itself for Moricetown, it brings with it economic opportunity. And I know Chevron and we operate around the world, and we're successful or most successful when the communities are involved in the project and there's a lasting impact. So I wouldn't say at all that the PTP pipeline is the answer to the issues in Moricetown. But I do think it's a part, and giving that economic opportunity is a part of moving the community forward in the direction the community wants to go.